Okay. Are you passionate about science, technology, engineering, or math? STEM junkie? But you think the academics are too tough and like it'll take forever, right? What if I told you maybe? Hi, I'm Dr. B, and I'm a STEM junkie just like you, and biomedical sciences PhD. I want you to know that if you ever felt like the academic ladder seems like you're climbing Jack's beanstalk to the ogres, you aren't completely off base. That is, with your current framework. See, I felt just like that at the beginning. But as a non traditional student, I had one thing going for me that I'm going to share with you in this video. Are you ready for it? I had a life and a business first. Seems like that would make going through the program so much harder, right? I was married with 3 kids, working as a hairstylist and co owner of a salon, but it actually gave me just the right edge. At first, it was tough to juggle, but I realized that if I applied the skills I used in my business to my education, it was like fire. I simply changed my focus from reaching the ogre at the top of the beanstalk to reaching the goose that laid the golden egg at the top. And just like Jack, I needed the right strategy to do it. And I had it. So let me break down the strategy. There's 6 steps. Are you ready? All right. Step number 1, find a mentor or a few. Step number 2, schedule everything. Step number 3, you teach people how to treat you. Number 4, you have a voice, use it. Number 5, the customer is always right-ish. And number 6, manage up. So let's take a deep dive into this. We'll start with mentors. When I started doing hair, I learned that I would get clients. People would let me do their hair if I said these things. I would do their hair exactly like my mentor. Whatever she said, I was going to go with it. Why? Because I didn't know anything yet, right? I hadn't proven myself yet. They trusted my mentor, and well, so did I, right? Another thing is, you never want to become an I act because I acts don't know Jack. Get it? Pun intended. Okay, whatever. I'm by myself. Anyway, I acts, that means that's somebody who says, and we all are guilty of it at times. So you got to be really careful about this one, right? It's when you say, I already know that. When you say that, you completely tune yourself out to receiving or hearing anything that the other person has to say. Please don't, whatever you do, don't rob yourself of the opportunity for growth that you are there for. Okay? All right. Another thing is, I learned to have the box talk while doing hair. The box talk goes something like this. And actually, I'm kind of famous for this now in my circle. It goes something like this. Are you ready? All right. For now, you don't have a box. While I'm training you, you're in my box. When you demonstrate that you know my box, then you can make your own box. Please feel free to ask constructive questions, but I'm not interested in entertaining you, or rather, if you are asking me a question to prove me wrong or poke holes in what I'm trying to tell you, I'll tell you to go ask Siri. If you're lucky, that'll be what I say. And if you keep it up, I just won't help you. Why? I know that seems harsh, but why? It's because you're annoying me. Now, this conversation I have with students ahead of time. I set my expectations very clearly, and this is the conversation that I have. It's also a conversation that I have in my own head when I catch myself say, I already know that, right? So if you catch yourself ever saying that, you give yourself the box talk, right? Because you want to pick up everything. Don't sell yourself short. All right. So I also have, like, I realized, like, I've always had a knack for, like, great mentors. My first mentor, and I'm just sharing this because I just love this man. My first mentor ever was Colonel Stanley Nikolai. He was an 80-year-old man who took the time to teach a 12-year-old girl how to study and preserve butterflies for the Smithsonian. I think I'll save the rest of that story for another time. Anyway, the point is, you may need to have a few. So one mentor might be like a peer mentor. So this is going to be someone who's just a couple years ahead of you, right? One that has or I guess another one would be like someone that has the end result that you're going for. See, as you climb the academic ladder, or really like any other ladder, you're going to want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for achieving your goal. Think about that, like your goal, like what do you want the end game to look like, right? And then, at the beginning of this road, you're going to consider things like, do you want to be a professor? Do you want to go into biotech industry? Are you going to go into pharmaceuticals, like pharmaceutical sales or marketing or something like that? Do you want to become an entrepreneur, right? The sooner you know where you are committed to going, the better, right? You're committed. It's all about you're committed to going. Like you have to do the work. So get really clear on what work or what the outcome is going to be that you're committed to, right? So set yourself up for success with mentors. Big, big key. Okay. So the next part, the next component is scheduling everything. This seems counterintuitive, but I'm telling you, start off with your non-negotiables. For me, that meant that when I got home at night, I did dinner, bath, story, prayers, and bedtime with my kids, right? They had an early bedtime. But it also meant that I spent about an hour or so engaging with my husband, right? That's a super important relationship to me. And so I want to make sure that I'm honoring that too. So that meant that, we'd sit down and talk for about an hour or so, listening to his day, validating him, encouraging him. And guess what? He'd do the same for me, right? We're helping and supporting each other. We're connecting, right? In a meaningful way. It also meant, putting in the exercise and scheduling things like family vacations, everything that you need to feel good about, like good and have the energy to go about doing, and meeting the demands of everything else, right? So also that meant scheduling in time for reflection. I actually, I'm going to expand on this a little bit more than I thought I would, but I actually kept a science journal like at home where I wrote about what happened that day in the lab, in my journey, and kind of reflected on, it might have been conversations that I had, interactions I had with students where I was like training them and had other questions. And I'd reflect on like experiments, and just like, it was just my way of processing things. And it really was helpful because I can't tell you how many eureka moments I had. It also helps you recognize trends. So like if you notice that like every day you're writing something down that like you procrastinated on, like, oh, tomorrow I'm gonna this, and every day you see like, oh my gosh, I keep saying tomorrow I'm gonna this and you don't do this, like you don't want that, right? So definitely reflecting is key for that. So after that, everything else. So then you put in the work, then you put in, all the other commitments that you have. See, what I notice is that we're so quick to sell ourselves out, right? Like we'll cut ourselves short and we end up just burning ourselves out, right? I'll do a little bit more on this in just a second. So the next component to this is you teach people how to treat you, okay? I hear people complain all the time about how their spouse, boss, teammates don't value or appreciate them. But have you ever considered, like, do you appreciate you? Do you make time for what's important to you? Hold on, give me just a second. Sorry, a little technical thing there. I think I'm good. So, the real question is like, do you appreciate you? Do you make time for what's important to you? Do you do what you say you will do when you say you will do it? If you want to be successful at anything, you must keep your word, especially with yourself. If you don't, And this happens to so many STEM track scholars. You'll end up burned out and have like zero confidence. Why? Because you keep lying to yourself. I know that seems harsh, but it's the truth. Another thing is we want others to ask us about our days, but like we don't even ask ourselves how our day was. We've really got to tune in and ask ourselves, like, what's going on? It's so important to validate yourself because otherwise you end up looking for that in others, right? Which leads you to insecure behaviors and basically opens you up to like a breeding ground for unhealthy relationships, right? And nobody wants codependent relationships, right? Like what do they call it? Class 5, stage 5 clinger or something like you don't need that, right? All right, so here's a couple tips on how you can teach people to treat you. Number 1, get your game face on. Show up ready to rock. Like as a grad student, like I showed up ready for the position that was higher than the position that I was in. I dressed business professional every day, and people would be like, "Oh, you're fancy," and I'm like, "No, this is me. This is my game face, right?" You know why? It sets the tone for your day. When you show up ready to work, guess what? You work. You get work done. All right, tip number 2, be on time, right? Number 3, if they're late, address it immediately. If you're supposed to meet with somebody and they're late, address it immediately, the very first time, or they will always be late. If you get a no-show or someone that's like more than 15 minutes late, you've got to do this. I'm telling you, it sounds crazy, but do not get them back on your schedule for at least 2 weeks, or they will never value your time. They will always be late, like every single time. They will always, I hate to say it like this, but it's true. They will always want you to compromise your time and your schedule and values, and they'll never be willing to compromise theirs. Another tip is that having empathy doesn't mean that you have to agree with them, okay? It's so important to voice your thoughts. And we'll touch on this a little bit more in the next topic, which is you have a voice, use it. I know this seems complicated in a mentor-mentee environment, especially as a graduate student with like zero autonomy, as in your fate seems to be in the hands of your mentor, PI, or boss, right? So always try to see their side, be on their side, take their side, do things to make them look good. If you're in a meeting, like give them a pep talk, like talk them up, whatever you can to like make them look good and be on their side, right? Another thing is like approach conflicts with curiosity, saying something like, wow, I always thought of it this way, but obviously I'm missing something. Is it ridiculous for me to ask you to walk me through that again? This works for a few reasons. 1, you aren't shutting yourself off from learning, so you're keeping your open mind, right? 2, you aren't attacking them by saying like, what, you're wrong. Like never do that. Okay. Never. That's like the worst thing you do. Never do that. And then number 3, this trick is so cool. Like, because I actually learned this from Chris Voss, who is like the head negotiator for the FBI and wrote this super awesome book called Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as If Your Life Depends on It. It's like amazing. And he also teaches a masterclass in like the masterclass app. Anyway, using the phrase, is it ridiculous? That part speaks to our desire to say no, right? See, we don't like commitment. So asking them this way, the is it ridiculous way, gives them control and power, right? They're going to get to say no, while it gives you the commitment to the result that you wanted, which in this case was getting the answer, right? If you still like can't see their point of view or something like that, speak to the problem, not the person. Saying something like, I'm afraid I still can't see it. The literature I've read or what I've seen in publications or the experiences that I've had, indicate this other thing. And it seems like maybe I'm conflicted at this. Give a very specific point. Can you point me in the direction where I can find out more about what you've presented, or like, right? Something like that. This will allow you and them to stay on great terms, right? Which you need if you want to reach your goal. So the next point here is the customer is always right-ish. I love this because I learned this doing hair. See, clients might come in saying, hey, I want bangs, but last time they had bangs was like 10 years ago and they hated them. You have to learn what they mean by bangs, right? That might mean just in this case, it might mean just a few, face framing pieces around the front, right? In science, your PI might say they want you to complete a project by X date, but really they may just want the data analyzed for the first few experiments, and they just want them in their hands so that they can look at them, right? If they say they want data, do they want raw data? Do they want analyzed data? How do they want the data? Like, do they want stats, no stats, bar graphs, dot plots, what? Do they want you to do it in a specific software? You've got to decipher what they mean, okay? By coming prepared, knowing where you're at and what you have available to you, and then asking the right questions, right? Then anticipating anything else you may need to know to get them what they want. So this really comes down to learning your people. So here you're learning your boss. That's what I'm encouraging you to do, right? Now, they may find some of this annoying at first. So again, if you set the expectations, right? Telling them like ahead of time that you're going to have a bunch of questions, like you're going into this meeting prepared to ask questions and get answers so that you can get them what they want. Sell them on the result part, right? They may be annoyed at first, but because of the maybe decision overload. So just be prepared ahead of time and prepare them ahead of time. And if you can, ask them questions like this or that, right? Yes or no, bar graph or plot. Like the more you know them, the more you'll be able to anticipate where what their expectations might be. So you'll have a better idea of what questions to actually ask. Plus, guess what? They are going to love the results. Why? Because you're delivering them exactly what they're asking for, exactly what they're expecting. And who wants to give somebody something they don't want? No, we want to please our bosses, right? We want to nail it, right? We want to hit the ball out of the park. So that's a great way to do that. Another thing that I would encourage you is to never, ever, ever, ever say no to your PI or boss. Instead, and this is for like project wise, like there are cases obviously where you should say no, but like when it comes to the research and the science, never say no, okay? Instead, I want you to try these things, okay? I want you to learn to manage up. Managing up means, well, here, many STEM bosses do not have actual management training, right? They may have attended a leadership workshop, but let's face it, they're more interested in reading about the science than they are about managing their teams, which actually hurts them pretty bad in the long run. But that's a separate topic. If they ask you to do something in addition to what's already on your plate and your workload, show them your plate, as in show them a list of the projects you're currently working on and ask them where this new idea maybe fits into the priority list. You could say something like, that's a great idea. And I love science. Here's what I've got on our list, our being a keyword, right? Our list so far. Where do you want that to fit into our list of priorities? Showing them a list makes them go, oh yeah, this is what we've got going on. Okay, actually, that one's more important than this, but it's not as important as this. So get to that at step, 4, something like that, right? You could also use this negotiation tactic called forced empathy, which Chris Voss also points out. And I'll give you an example. So say something like, how am I supposed to do that? Or how am I supposed to fit that in? Like, it makes them think about your perspective, and it makes them think about the details without you saying, hey, look at all this. I've got, that kind of, when you point out like all this stuff that you've got going on, it sounds like one, you're whining, and two, like, like you don't really care about what they care about, right? So like, you don't want to do that, right? So it makes them, put themselves in your position, but then also kind of think about the details that some of which you may not even know, right? Like you might think, oh yeah, we don't really have enough funding right now for that. It's coming, but that might have to be something that we put on the back burner until like August, or right. Like it helps them kind of realize where things are at. Or, they might even think like, oh yeah, you're swamped. You've got X, Y, and Z, and those are our top priority projects right now. So, you basically get them to make the call on how to proceed, right? So a few more tips to managing up. Ready? Sorry, I feel like I'm over delivering. I hope I'm over delivering. I hope you guys find this helpful. So one, well, not one. I don't know what number that is. Probably like 4, 5, 6. I don't know, 10. Anyway, a few more tips to managing up. Set clear expectations with them. You want them to value you, right? So show them how much you value them. What makes them tick? What projects they're most excited about? What it will mean to them personally and professionally to get those results, right? Like, what's that going to mean to them? What's that going to do for them? You could also ask things like, what's that going to indicate? Like, what do you expect the results to indicate? Like, what's that going to mean? Like, really, that's that part about learning, learning them. And then actively participating and contributing to the thing that they care about the most. That's going to put you in a very valuable position to them, and you'll become their greatest asset, right? So set clear expectations with them regarding how you work too, like timeframes, delivery, and also like how you like to receive feedback, maybe pet peeves you have, etc., and invite them to share the same with you. This other one is like key too. Make your schedule available to them. You could use like Google Calendar or whatever, and you can just share that calendar. You can mark your private stuff as private, but at least then they can see what you're up to, and then you don't have to answer questions like, hey B, what are you doing today, right? Hey B, what's on the agenda today? If they have access to your calendar, then they can just go and be like, oh, I can't book a meeting here because she's, in the vivarium, or, oh, I can't book a meeting here because she's in a meeting with so-and-so. You know what? She's got this time here. Hey, B, do you mind if I schedule us for a quick, chat, 30 minutes about whatever, right? It really helps. And it helps you not have to feel like you're at their beck and call just to tell them what you're up to, right? That way they have access. It also tells them like when they can expect things from you, right? If you have a project on there where you're running like the last experiment on X day and time, and you've already told them in advance that it takes you 3 days to analyze the data, then they know that they can expect data from you in 3 days from that date. And that's like, it's so helpful. I know a lot of people are like, I don't want to share. Just do it. Trust me. Save yourself the hassle and the headache. It's like automation, right? So I think that about wraps it up. But sorry, look, I feel like I am going over, but I hope you don't mind if I over deliver. I really want you to have all of the info going forward. So, so I guess the next part of this is like, why does this work? Right? Like, why does this work? If you guess that it's the laws of physics or laws of thermodynamics, then you're right. Wait, what? No, no one guessed that. No? Okay. All right. Don't worry. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but I'm going to point out a couple of them. Okay. You've got the law of energy, law of conservation of momentum, law of entropy. There's a whole bunch more. Sorry. I think I stumbled on my word there. Law of entropy. Look, which is funny that I stumbled on that word because that is about chaos. And anyway, pun intended. But taken together, they tell us that energy can be borrowed and focused energy is power. That it's hard to make a moving object stop moving, so keep going, and that everything heads towards chaos unless we do something about it. This last one really speaks to our relationships with ourselves and others, so be careful not to let your mind or others' minds wander if you can prevent it. Setting expectations really helps with that, and kind of that calendar thing that we were just talking about. These laws and many others govern our world. One of my favorite people, Myron Golden, says, that it's to save God the trouble of having to repeat himself, which I like to think of him or God as saying, "Hey, B, I grant you gravity today. Keep your feet on the ground." Okay, I'm laughing in my head. I don't know if you guys are laughing, but whatever. I'm cracking myself up. I don't care. I'm doing me. Anyway, by using the tips that I shared with you today, you'll be working with nature rather than against it. See, when we focus our energy at the beginning on getting our mind, our schedule, and our expectations straight, we get to conserve our energy for later, right? Because we won't be asking our brains to rapidly switch gears between the thing that we should be focusing on, right? And the thing that we should have already focused on, right? Which helps us keep our momentum moving forward and towards our goal. Anyway, I feel like I'm going way over. So you get the point. Work with nature, save yourself the heartache and time. See, when I started, I thought it would take years, like 6 to 8 years just for the PhD part. Why? Because that was what I saw everyone around me doing. I could have fallen for it. I mean, there was like a ton of evidence supporting their claims. And I'm a scientist, so I buy the evidence, right? But I'm so glad I didn't buy it because then I did it my way. I was like, well, okay, that might be so for them, but like something in me was like, I've got this other different perspective, which sometimes, I felt like it was a curse, but then in this way, it totally wasn't. Because when I started, I thought it would take years, right? Like 6 to 8 years just for the PhD. But here's what I'm going to tell you. I finished my master's in chemistry in a year and a half. Usually a master's in chemistry could be about 2, maybe 3 years. Then I finished my PhD in biomedical sciences, specifically in bioelectrics, in 3 years. So I did it in like half of the time, right? Mind you, all of that while doing hair and raising my family. And I'm not saying this to toot my horn or anything, right? Like, that's not what this is about. It was such a humbling experience for me. And I'm telling you this because I want you to believe what I believe. And that is that if I can do it with a family and business to run, you can do it too. All right. Well, that is all I have for you tonight. I'm so pumped. I can't wait to hear what you guys say about like how you're finding the material. Please like comment, like in the box below, and let me know how this serves you. And if you have anything to add, if like let me know what your favorite parts were, okay? All right. All right. Okay, that's it. All right, that's a wrap. That's a wrap. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks. Bye.